fire. I can look at the flames. I enjoy what fire can do. I like the opposition of fire. And I like what metal can become by using fire. It sort of transcends its existence of being hard, brittle. It becomes supple, soft. So bringing something from flatness to the roundness, something that has weight, density, mass, volume, and bringing it into space. I love found materials. I love objects that I'll find refuse in dump on the street. Each piece talks differently to me. Each piece has its own language.
One of our very first dates was he took me to a huge scrap metal yard somewhere in New York, and we were on a mission to find pieces for him for his sculpture, material for his sculpture. And it was just a blast. We were like two little mountain goats climbing these huge hills of discarded steel pieces. And it was like a visual treasure hunt where we were looking for pieces that were different shapes, different sizes, different textures. It was great. It was great fun. And it gave me a very keen appreciation for how Stan puts together what is the equivalent of a painter's palette.
What was it like being a child of a sculptor? Well, for the child mind, it didn't seem that absurd or out of the ordinary, but looking back on it, such a gift, such a gift. Growing up in New York City and with a father who was constantly creating and, taking me to museums and seeing his work, and the influence was so there and present for me, and I was absorbing all this and having an artistic mind, a father who's thinking outside of the box and creatively. I definitely was a sponge to it all, and by 5 years old was telling my parents, I'm going to be an actor, and I was graciously welcomed, like, of course, wonderful, which I know is a big gift and not something to take for granted. A memory I have of being at my dad's studio, he shared this giant space in Brooklyn with a couple artists. And it was, as a small child, definitely the space itself was overwhelming. And I remember going there and this huge door we would open and then it would reveal just, you see this space here. It felt 10 times bigger, huge sculptures and found objects, as he works with so many different elements. And I remember distinctly, he showed me this piece, like I know exactly where I was standing, and he pointed to it and he said, this is what negative space is. And he pointed to the negative spaces in between the metal that he had woven back and forth. And I just remember as a kid being like, this is amazing, like it clicking and processing what he was saying and really getting it. There were just so many moments like that where I felt like, wow, I'm learning.
In those period of the 80s, he was finding himself in this midst of, you could live in New York cheaply, lots of artists were around, great exhibitions. So New York had that kind of high-low culture going, and Stan was kind of cruising along on that. A number of important influences, all in the sort of post-war era. Number one, I would say, would be David Smith, who, is widely considered as the greatest from that abstract expressionist era, the greatest American sculptor to emerge. So Smith was one of Stan's early heroes. And it's not just Smith. There's from lesser known David Hare, who's had a very surrealist influenced practice and was spent a lot of time in Paris, was friends with Alberto Giacometti, and of course Stan would also lean on that great artist, Giacometti. And then there was the English sculptor Anthony Caro, Sir Anthony Caro, and who originally worked for Henry Moore. So you have that really nice sort of, whether you want to call it not genealogy or provenance, but Stan definitely had both feet firmly planted in those great post-war artists sculptors who, worked in steel, bronze, etc. So that transition from the city to where we are here, sort of, he made his mark. Well, it was a great move for Stan in many ways, and in terms of developing his practice in a kind of sensational way, in terms of having more room, the scale of his work expanded, the production, the creativity was kind of remarkable in terms of how prolific Stan has been, given this idyllic setting. It's country, but it has an industrial edge. I'm talking about the studio here. And Stan was able to, develop his vocabulary in a more robust fashion, and to incorporate more of his interests from nature, from moving beyond the city.
I believe I met Stan probably a good 25 years ago. I had seen his work at a number of gallery exhibitions, and I was so intrigued by what he was doing. I don't know that I had really met him yet, but I knew at that time I had to have him exhibited at the university, at Westchester University, in our gallery. So I sought him out. We made our connection as artists, and then I brought him on board for, I think, at least 2 exhibitions and a number of group shows within Westchester. He took those objects and really put them in front of us to sort of make us aware, but also it was almost like a repurposing. But not only were the objects constructed and juxtaposed in a way to really create an exciting sculpture, but I also saw that he was using other fabricated metal rods, other metal objects that really, to me, created, in a sense, a line drawing within his work. So we had all these different elements working together, and that's what really intrigued me about what he was doing. Later, through his career, I saw him using color. Early on, I just loved the patinas that he was working with. I guess the penetral surface, how he really approached the imagery and the object. But I guess several years back, he started using a touch of red in his work. And for me, that took things to a different level. It really created a point for the viewer, a point for the viewer to really focus in on, and then re-examine the rest of the imagery and the sculpture.
At the time I met Stan and came out here, we were furnishing an apartment in New York City. And we had this idea that you walk down a long hallway before you got to sort of a big living room that opened up onto the East River. And wouldn't it be fabulous if we had Stan's work on each side of the hallway coming down sort of as your focal point as you entered.
People seem to engage with the work on a very deep and visceral level. And when they speak of it in terms that are very evocative, whether it be related to what they see in the work, the story it's telling them, or how they interpret the work, or what it means to them, or the feelings that it arouses within them.
Stan's art has a unique blend of things that are recognizable and things that are unexpected. You think of, say, Picasso, maybe, with some of his quirky but not quirky things that are, when I say recognizable, I mean like archetypes of something, something circular or something fluid or something growing or something underwater, something recognizable, a face maybe, or a particular shape. But he adds this twist to it that almost always makes you smile, almost always puts this little light bulb up that you kind of know what he's doing. You're not sure. You have your own instant interpretation of it, which may or may not have anything to do with what Stan actually intended. But what I love about Stan is that he delights in whatever your interpretation is. It could be anything. He just loves that engagement with people who are enjoying and interacting with his art. I suspect that we've talked about this, but one of the things that appealed to us in the very beginning with Stan's work is that he's repurposing objects that have been largely discarded. Yeah. And there's something so appealing to us about that. Yeah. Our sort of mission in life is to leave the world better and waste nothing. And that certainly seems to be a driving force of Stan's as well.
I think that at very first, before we've seen anything, I think we saw some of his mask in his home with it, but before we've seen it, what really liked this, we saw the pile he has collected of stuff, old farm equipment and wrought iron, and there was some from Master Briggs. We actually bought a piece, and that was one of the first pieces we bought because it looks like a helix, but for us it's a DNA. Because we always talked about when we started dance school, the dance school DNA, what's that? And if you go to the dance school building in front, you have that Stan's helix that's called Marcinil. Because it was made out of materials when the refurbished, or we did some of the Marcinil bridge. So he got some of the old material that took out of that and made this sculpture out of it. So, what we really liked was that he used things that normally would be thrown away.
His work is just so approachable, which is amazing because it's steel, and steel on its own and found objects on their own can be so daunting or cold or the opposite of what he creates when he makes his work. As a storyteller, I love that I can look at his work, whether it is a mask or an outdoor larger piece, and just go, oh, I see something that probably the next viewer doesn't, and that to me is also so exciting. It's quite a feat in my mind that he can create something that draws an audience in and doesn't push them away with something as harsh and abrasive as like steel. It's not for the faint of heart, right? For someone to take that on as a career. So there's a level of pride that I feel when I start talking to anyone who is like, oh, what does your dad do?
You see where putting together disparate elements in the metal turns into art, turns into other. And that's magic. Mm-hmm. And he does it, and he does it with very little. But he's just so encouraging. And there's something, it's the interchange that you have with Stan. But plus, too, being in the environment where his work is so beautifully dappled along this landscape that's, hidden away along a creek. And it's just very alive. He brings the magic of metal, really. It's a completely new form that he creates. And, if he's working with an environment, it enlivens the environment. There's no question about it. And the three-dimensionality of it, you walk around and all of a sudden, the environment changes with. It supplements the environment and enhances the environment. And yet the piece is of its own as well.
I think Stan's work is unique. I think it pulls out emotions and is also ways to have great discussions. So I have had discussions about his artwork with people, whether it's the shadows that are coming across or just the feeling that the masks give you. And so for us, for my husband and myself, we enjoy his artwork and look at it all the time.
But when it's a shorter tip and comes out, you can get a very steady, easy flow of material coming across. 20, 25 years ago, I got involved in a workshop that altered my life dramatically and made me see the world differently. So I promised myself that someday I'll give this back to people. I could see a stone base with this piece.
Oh, that would be.
Stone would be beautiful.
Stan is just wonderful as a mentor and contributor all along the whole creative process, from start right down to how you put the finishing touches on a piece.
I think Stan's love for teaching art goes way back to a workshop he took with Anthony Caro in the 70s, and it was a great workshop in New York somewhere. Anthony Caro and Clement Greenberg were both there, and I have a picture of them looking at one of Stan's works, which is precious to both of us. And he so enjoyed what happened up there in terms of his learning, his growth, and the collaboration with the other artists, and both Clement and Anthony. And he vowed, when he came through that experience, he said to himself, someday I want to be able to do this, provide a workshop to other people if I can. So, and indeed he did. He's done 16 years of Marshall Bridge studio workshops, which he just loved. And one of the things that I hear from people who have taken the workshop and others and students of his at DCAD, they love the way Stan has a learning environment and does these workshops, because he gives information, but he is very, very positive when he looks at work. He looks to build people up, find the beauty in what they've done. When he gives feedback, it's with a very soft touch. So he lets the students really have their own exploration and adventure. And they love that. They find it a very positive, kind of reaffirming way to develop their art.
I think the really thing in the forefront is the way Stan created the workshop, the sculpture workshop. That enabled, not only professional artists, but novice, people of all different levels and areas of expertise to be able to come in and really experience the creative process. I had the opportunity to visit, not take a workshop, but visit the exhibitions for a number of the shows. And I was just amazed at what he encouraged individuals to create. I know some folks had never been involved in the art world at all. And the objects that they made and the finished products were just phenomenal.
Stan's workshop, it's an action-packed week. It's usually 2 one-week sessions with 10 students. And during that class, the first day, we go through, and on that first day, everyone learns anything from welding, plasma cutting, different operations with the torch, forging. So it's like really a major crash course. Then after that first day, everyone's hands-on. It's a really great collaboration between Stan, his assistants, and the 10 students on coming about designs and problem solving throughout the week. So everyone comes into the class usually with some sort of goal or set plan of what they'd like to create, whether it's like a chair or a table or something practical, or if it's an abstract steel sculpture. So we help them and guide them through that process. So it's a very fun collaboration. It's very personable, just a very engaging week we have.
The most fun adult camp you can ever have in your entire life, because it's not that really boring kind of, write all these things down, regurgitate, do it just like I do it sort of thing. It's not like that at all. He only takes about 10 students at a time, and there's a really great ratio with professionals. Not only he's there as the main instructor, but there are other welding instructors as well, who really know steel inside and out. Anyway, so it's all, motley group of adults. And the first day, they tell you lots of rules and, scary medium and all that kind of stuff. And he's really great about the safety measures and so on. And you're going, oh my gosh, I hope I remember all this. And then it's, now go to town. And it's so scary, and then it's also so liberating. All of a sudden you see this pile of junk in his gorgeous studio. It's an outdoor studio right on the river. It's lovely. And just the steel parts that are used to be former engines or plumbing parts or cogs or what have you, all of a sudden there are interesting circles, and the rust has patina, and you just look at everything in an entirely different way. Every thrown away thing that has its own particular history suddenly has an artistic merit. It's a wonderful art supply, and you become a sculptor, even though you walked in knowing absolutely nothing.
Stan's workshop was the most immersive art experience of my life, and it was such a gift to be able to create in such a beautiful, serene atmosphere with such support and help all around you and all your supplies. I've never experienced anything like it. Taking Stan's workshop was a total game changer for me. I was able to take my work from tabletop and wall sculpture to now elevate it on steel armatures. This opportunity was incredible for all of us artists to add this medium to our repertoire.
His affection for the medium is so contagious. And so what's happened with the Marshall Bridge workshops and with his teaching and just with his community involvement, he's bred a very large group of amateurs and professionals who have the same love of metal that he does.
Stan was a great teacher. I mean, he has a great understanding of the fundamentals of design, 3D design, as well as a really good understanding of materials. But for me, he was really, the thing that stood out was his patience. He really had this great quality of being able to listen and give really good positive feedback.
We have a personality of somebody who is wise and humble and intuitive and imaginative, and also very compassionate towards people who have no talent or to people who have tons of talent. Everybody's kind of equal. He gets his buzz on when he's creating, and he's a master. And what I appreciate about that is I'm able to look at his artworks and get completely lost in them. And I appreciate them, and I value them, and it takes me to another space. And then I look to the man, and he's so kind and humble. The ego, I'm sure there has to be someone, it's got to be somewhere, but he is kind, and he's eager to see what you see when you look at one of his pieces. Or when you're creating yours, he's eager to experience what you're experiencing. That's such an unusual trait.
What I do now as a teacher that I learned from Stan is to wait and listen before speaking.
Well, I would first thank Stan for really, as an educator, a fellow educator, everything that he did, not only for young students, but for students of all ages. And again, I would kudos to him for everything, all the encouragement that he put forth. And again, just what he brought to the artist community. whether it was down at DCAT or DCCA or Westchester University. He was so sharing with everything.
What I love about Stan is that he makes me brave to interpret things in a fresh way that I might not have otherwise seen. So because he's seeing things and creating and consolidating and connecting different shapes and pieces and textures, he's inviting the audience to do the same. So I always felt an open invitation to see new things and interpret in new ways what he has in front of me. And that, sense of bravery that Peter talked about is very inspiring. He never makes one feel that we've misinterpreted his work. I think he welcomes that. And there's always this kind of glint of a smile on his face when he listens to how you speak about his work.
Sustainable. He made his career sustainable throughout the years and tried new things and engaged in new ideas and applied them, and witnessing him showing up for his work alongside being a father and a husband and supporting his family with his family. It was just really powerful to see him keep coming back to the work, keep reinvesting himself in the work. It was just really powerful to witness. And I'd say as a daughter of a sculptor and an artist, it was a really important blueprint to see how one can stay in alignment with what they love and their career and wanting to chase it and be a part of it and stay true to oneself artistically, when there could be so many outside influences too of what it should look like, both the work itself and what that lifestyle should look like too.
I could be working, and if you slow down, you can actually, I hear the water, the trickle of the water on the stream, and that empowers me. It really empowers me to think about the work that I'm doing.